Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Crubcast, a special Crub sidecast. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Kevin, also known as the Golden Bolt, as you see on screen right there. And today, our topic for the day is what we would want to change out of our favorite video game franchises. So we all picked a list of things that we wanted to talk about whatever our game of choice we wanted to mention, and we're going to go through them and talk about some cool positive improvements for different games. First up, I'm here with Trav. Hi, Trav. How are you, and what game are you covering?
How's it going? Hey, I'm going to be covering something that I've never played before, Metroid. Very excited to talk about it for the first time.
The very first time you've ever mentioned Metroid ever anywhere on Earth.
I learned about it yesterday.
That's pretty impressive. Brody, how are you doing today, and what are you going to be talking about?
I'm doing very well. I'm going to be complaining about one of my favorite game series of all time, Borderlands.
Okay, hell yeah. What's your favorite Borderlands, out of curiosity?
That's an interesting question, but I think I got to go with the original, and that's going to come through as we'll see. Okay,
that's fair. I've put a little bit of time into different Borderlandses, but pre-sequel is the one I think I enjoyed the most, which I know is a controversial take sometimes.
I just learned right now for the first time that this is your favorite series.
No, well, I wouldn't say my favorite. I actually debated on doing Spyro, but I just realized that there was that I put that series on too high of a pedestal to be able to properly critique it. Whereas Borderlands, I very much know what I want. I've known what I want in that series for a long time, and they just, goddamn it, they won't give it to me again.
Brody's Spyro opinions would not be able to fit in the hour-long time slot we have today.
No, that's why I'm totally eventually going to do that reignite. I'm never doing the reignite.
The Brody cast.
Can't wait for the reignited video. Let's go. Nicco, how you doing, bud? And what are you going to be talking about today?
What's good, fellas? I am talking about souls today. I'm talking about souls.
Digging holes and taking souls.
Digging holes and taking souls. That's the wrong
Is there a specific souls?
Well, it seems most probable that it will end up being Elden Ring 2, but
that's not a game.
Well, I mean, they'll probably make it. The numbers don't lie.
That's fair. Elden Ring's numbers are pretty schnumbery, whatever that means.
They're
it'll be Elden Ring, but with a Roman numeral 2 for where the I is.
Oh, I hate that.
Elden Ring, like designer.
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate that so much.
Oh my god.
And I'm going to be talking about, of course, if you know my hashtag brand, I'm only allowed to talk about Ratchet Clank. So I'll be talking about things for the new Rivet and Kit game or whatever the hell. And we might talk about a little bit of Spider-Man 2, because that's out this year. And that might as well be the next Ratchet Clank game, if we're being totally honest. So we're going to go in like a clockwise-y type order. Trav, let's start with you. What's the first thing that you would want to improve or change in the next Metroid title?
All right, so buckle down because I only played it yesterday. No. All right, this is a bad bit. I'm retiring that early. No, so I think the biggest thing, we just got off of Dread. Big deal, very exciting to play, built off of some of the movement and close quarters parrying that Samus Returns introduced, and I really like that. They added the sliding so that you can have these sort of one block high gaps, I guess, that you can move through before you get the morph ball, which then expands on that even more. I really like that. I want to see some more movement tech added to that. But I think the first thing I'm going to start with is building off of how Dread built off the parry system. They added the ability to do like this sort of running slide that's like an uppercut that you can use not just as a parry, but literally as a close range, sort of close quarters move that damages everything directly in front of you, that's upgraded as you get more suits. And I think that my biggest thing there would just be, let's see. Frankly, I don't have the best ideas. Let me just get that on the record. But
great
my
opening.
Biggest thing. Yeah, I know, right? Here, people listen to me on the internet. Here, I don't have good ideas. But one thing that I was kind of hoping that we would see in Dread that didn't end up happening was an almost Metroid Prime style utilization of the grapple beam for combat rather than just movement, which I think should stay there. And there was a single enemy that I think only appeared in like 3 rooms in the game, where you're able to grapple this enemy on the other side of like wherever it is and yank it down to expose the weak point early and kill it quickly if you could time it right. But that ended up not being integrated the best, in my opinion. And I feel like there is something missing, I guess, with Samus in how she's portrayed in cutscenes like a badass. She's doing a lot of flippy shit and like grabbing people by the fucking tail and throwing them grabbing people by the tail and throwing them against the wall or whatever. But it's all done in cutscenes, like after you've already beaten the boss. Here's a little cinematic to take them out.
Or QTEs even.
Yeah, and I guess Other M tried that a bit, but I mean, you're essentially playing that game with the same control scheme as a Nintendo controller from the 80s.
Yeah,
so
the Yuji Naka method of control systems.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if what I want is QTEs exactly, akin to like Spider-Man, but something that I guess to bring in another franchise that I don't shut up about, like Doom, like a sort of borrowing from the glory kill system a little bit, to weaken enemies, get them to a certain state, maybe yank off parts of their armor that's completely optional, stuff like that, that's utilizing new close quarters moves, giving you a bonus for parrying, that kind of stuff.
Even in the sense of like, you could do it just like how the newer Doom games have done, where if you kill an enemy with melee, that gives you ammo, and then that way early on, when you're limited on ammo, or if there are abilities that they intentionally limit your max ammo on, which I know is not very Metroid, but that would be kind of interesting to see, like a more limited Metroid experience in terms of you're still upgrading your character, but maybe you don't have 7 million missiles by the end. Maybe you still only have 50.
Trav, I do have a question for you.
Hi.
When you're picturing this, are you picturing, like, close your eyes, picture it, are you picturing a 2D Metroid game or a 3D Metroid game?
This would be a 2D side scroller. So, I mean, I don't want to say turning it into a beat 'em up.
It'd be very hard to do with the first person games.
The closest thing I could think of there, and I mean, this isn't even my original point, but Metroid Prime 2 had limited ammo for the beams, and I think it's the only game that did that. And so I guess to tie that back to what you mentioned about doing certain moves to bring back ammo, they could use a system like that, in regards to having, I don't remember the term, I used it a lot, I can't remember, but that sort of rock, paper, scissors sort of thing that Doom does, but with the beam ammo.
Yeah.
The flowchart.
It also sounds like you want, like, in general, just more substantiative combat. And just something that's a little more involved than what's there.
Yeah, and there is an argument that could go against what Metroid's about, because that's why they give you the screw attack at the end of the game. It's like literally jump through every enemy that you've seen before, because now you're on the victory lap.
I'd like to point just towards Guacamelee, which is very much. They steal the Chozos outright. Like they're not subtle with their inspirations. But one thing that does separate it is that it is very, like, you get these sort of combat rooms, and you are, as Juan, sort of like grappling them and doing all these like luchador moves on these guys. And it is a much more substantiative combat system. I don't think it takes away from the rest of that Metroidvania sort of experience, but it is maybe a bit telling that they kind of isolate them in their own rooms. Like, combat's its own separate thing apart from traversal, typically.
Yeah.
It's hard to combine them. That's why, like, Ori really, the first Ori game struggled a lot with doing much more than having movement-based power-ups, which on one hand I kind of liked, but on the other hand there were a lot of enemies that you could, I believe, take down. It's been a while since I played Ori, but you could take them down, but it was more like a just kind of get past them or get around them, and there were usually only 3 enemies on screen. So there's a lot of different takes on it. Like even just yesterday, I was playing for the first time in years. What's the name? Shoot, Dead Cells. That's the one. The pseudo roguelite / roguelike Vania game that now has Castlevania DLC, which is kind of cool. And even with that one, like that one has a pretty solid combination of melee and ranged weapons, but it also intentionally limits you so that you can only have 2 weapons at any given point, compared to Metroid, where the point is to have all of them. So it would be tough to keep the balance between both sides useful throughout the course of the game, unless you specifically did do a Doom where you designed enemies that had to be taken down first with one specific style, which would be okay, but I think a lot of people would give that flack for making the encounters too samey. Because if there's a certain enemy, like let's say a Chozo statue enemy, if you could only take those down with melee first to get their armor chipped, and then you could missile them, it makes every encounter, it's almost like a sub-boss of its own. And if there's a bunch of those in game, you're limiting your options. And that kind of does go against a little bit of the Metroid freedom, sort of. So it's a tough balance they'd have to strike, but they've clearly been trying since as far back as Other M, and then going into Mercury Steam's stuff. It's Mercury Steam, right? Yeah, Mercury Steam stuff with the Samus Returns and Dread. There's still that very clear influence of Sakamoto and what he kind of wanted to do with Other M, narrative aside. So that's an interesting one. Brody, what's your first one for Borderlands?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say about Borderlands is just something I think that anyone who has jumped into the game, especially the more recent ones, will, if you have any inclination towards exploring, you've hit this problem, which is you've just dropped down on Eden 6. It's this giant, lush, like jungle planet and there's huge biomes. You can go to all these different places, and you decide, okay, I'm gonna go off the beaten path for a second and explore. And you go, you come across this like shanty village or whatever, and you're looking at that, and you're looking at it, and you're going, there's going to be enemies here later. You're looking at it and you're thinking, there's going to be at some point in the future an NPC that will give me a side quest that will tell me to come back here, and when I do, enemies will spawn, and the MacGuffin I need for that quest will also be there, and then I gotta get it. So, and they'll add in maybe these little things like the vault symbols or the crew challenges in 3 to give you some reason for exploration, but it, like, I don't know, there's nothing more telling than when you reach so many areas that are just completely empty on arrival, knowing, okay, I'm coming back here later. And so the thing that I think would improve on this is looking at what makes a game like Fallout New Vegas work in its sort of mission structure, which is that you can pick up a mission at any point in what would be that mission. And there's a lot of people have a complaint about Borderlands, which is, oh, I got to go back to the hub world and I got to talk to all of these people before I can, actually do anything, or it makes me do this. And then, even in just the main story, I know that's a big thing for a lot of people, but I think it would be so, I think, beneficial to you don't have to do a complex like narrative tree system like New Vegas or something like that. You just have to make the mission accessible before you talk to the specific NPC who would have given it to you. Like, if you can,
I'm almost surprised that that's not a thing, because I haven't noticed that in the bits of, I think, all of the Borderlands games. Actually, I think I've played all of them a little bit. I had never noticed that, but that's like an open world gaming sin.
Yeah, it's really it's really noticeable if you do any exploration like off the beaten path, basically at all. Like even as someone who I will go in and I will accept all of the side quests right away as soon as I see them, so that they have them, so I know they're active. Borderlands will usually be like, okay, but we're gonna keep some of them and you're not going to get them right away. You're going to
Yeah.
go back to the hub world later, and it's going to send you back to this planet, which in and of itself I think is fine. I think it's good to have reasons to go back, but the fact that they're just empty areas waiting to be populated, and so much of that would be solved if they were just willing to, spawn the enemies, give you the item, and let you do them. And then when you eventually do meet the NPC that would have given you the mission, you can just say, "Oh, hey, I have this thing already. Here it is." And I think the reason they won't do it is part of my second thing, but I'll get into that later. Nicco, how about you? What's your first thing?
I was just going to say, I mean, real quick, like, me and Kevin played Borderlands 3 together, and I did notice that, actually. Like, we had to go back to the hub world quite often.
That I remember.
wasn't-
But it was
Yeah.
like, that was more in the sense of they would give us a mission, we'd go do it and come back, they'd give us another, which was
Yeah, but-
standard fare for like a mission-based game. But I'm surprised that, I guess it makes sense because there are a lot of those areas that they use multiple times, which
Yeah.
is another fair way to do it in that sort of looter-shooter kind of game, where you don't want to just create a bunch of arenas that you only use once, so you have multiple different uses for them with different missions and different enemies that show up there after they spawn because of the mission. But maybe just have one mission already there, and then when you clear it, another one of those missions will load there, and like it scales with level. So let's say you're like level 20, you do the first set, which is like level 20, and then you go and you come back before you even have the second quest. It's like level 35. Like, hey, you're going to get bodied if you come here. That way, it's almost like another organic way of saying, go do other things, and then come back and get the cool loot.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
Yeah,
Oh.
I agree.
Trav, you go.
You can. Oh, okay. No, I was actually playing Borderlands 3 recently, and that's one of the things that made me quit. Was I'd approach the game almost like it was Far Cry, and just like go do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, here's this area that's on the way, or I guess Fallout might be a better example. Like I just stumble upon this place midway through trying to go to my focused quest. I'd clear it out, get all the loot that's there. It wasn't part of any active quest. And then, like, a couple hours later, I'd get a side quest that tells me to go to this place that I've already looted, and now in this washing machine that I've already opened is a quest item that was not there before.
That's what would bother me, because I remember that, actually, now that I think about it. I remember those happening, where there'd be a cleared out area, and there wouldn't be any enemies, because we already did it, and we'd come back, like, a couple hours later in game, and that's frustrating. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely frustrating.
I think it belies a very brute force approach to game design, right? Where they're just like, well, here's our mission. You're gonna do our mission. You're gonna listen to the definitely really funny audio that we've written, and you're gonna I think part of me thinks they don't change it just because that's the way it's always been, and they just don't feel like putting in the work to actually create a new system for that. And part of me thinks it's because they don't like the idea of any of their very cleverly written dialogue being skipped.
You mean this guy on the side of the road saying "please shoot me in the fucking face" isn't a direct quote? Sorry, isn't
my life
what
left
you
me.
want?
No, well, actually, Trav, that's actually the one instance in the game where maybe they do let you skip dialogue, because you can just shoot him in the fucking face early.
That is true. That is true.
Nicco, what about you? What's the first thing for Souls/Elden Ring that you would change or improve or what have you?
I'll start with my coldest. I'll start with my cold takes, and we'll get hotter as the episode goes on. So, my coldest take about all this is that I really, really, really like the implementation of magic in Elden Ring, and I think if they theoretically make an Elden Ring 2, that they should keep the magic diversity and, if anything, continue to expand that, because it makes for really varied gameplay, it makes for really fun gameplay, and it makes it way more accessible to people who aren't necessarily Souls veterans. Now, there's still some critical thinking that goes on there. You have to plan your build. You have to plan your build around the spells, and you have to know how to use them. You have to get the timing down. Like, you're at a distance, but you're not safe.
And most enemies have their own magic. Like most bosses have magic of their own that they will hit you with if you play range. So
absolutely.
I will say two things. I was a magic build in my Elden Ring playthrough. For one, because I was like, yeah, it's in the game, I'm going to use it. And two, if there are still any people out there that try and gatekeep builds in Elden Ring and you play like Sword and Shield and that's it, good for you. We don't care. You can do you. Watch as we don't care about what you do, so you don't have to care about what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have fun your own way.
Yeah.
It's lame to stop other people from having fun their way. Especially
in a series that, like, given is continuing to rapidly grow, but especially in a series that, with Elden Ring, found a big breakthrough in sales, found a big breakthrough with an audience that would never have otherwise played a game like Elden Ring, simply because it was the closest thing that we'll ever probably get for the foreseeable future to a Breath of the Wild experience where you are plopped into this world and you just have to figure it out. Like, you get to figure out based on contextual clues in the environment or anything like that. Like, yes, there's Tears of the Kingdom coming pretty soon, but I don't think it's going to have the same experience again as Breath of the Wild did. Like, I think it'll be an incredible game and it likely will be my game of the year, but I don't know that they can capture lightning in the bottle twice with the same map. Whereas Elden Ring does the thing where it's like, hey, there's a big open world and you get to do anything and go anywhere you want. More so, to some extent, than Breath of the Wild, and it does the big open world reveal like 5 times. Like it's good every time. It gets bigger, and you're just like, how are they doing this? How?
Like, how is there more game?
Dude, the fact that it's good every time is what gets me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you. With the Tears of the Kingdom take, I think I agree, and I think that applies here as well, to be honest with you. I don't think that you're going to get that again with Elden Ring, but then again, they do it 5 times in the game, and who knows?
I think with Elden Ring, if there were a sequel, they'll be able to do it again, because it won't be the same map. Like, Breath of the Wild's map is the map from the first game, but with sky islands, and maybe underground. Really? It's the same map, but they changed a couple things. Probably a lot of things.
That's exhausting.
I feel like that's a whole topic in and of itself, though.
I don't want to talk about that
that's
right
a whole
now, but
thing.
that is exhausting.
I'm sure we'll do a Tears of the Kingdom spoiler cast at some point.
To circle back to what Nicco was saying, I know that Nicco and I had a conversation months ago where he had approached the game as a very like melee oriented build, and I had suggested to him, and it was this simple little idea, which is that magic is to Elden Ring what aggression was to Bloodborne, where Bloodborne you could clearly see FromSoft looking at the way that players play Dark Souls, and a majority of that being very defensive and very shield based, like attack only when there's an opportunity. They're like, okay, how do we circumvent this? How do we get players to think take away the shield, give health back when you hit them, make the whole story about going mad with violence, and then just like bake that into the gameplay and then Elden Ring comes along and they go, okay, what aren't players doing, or what do we want them to do, or what are they doing again too much?
Let's find another way to screw with them and figure out how we can continue to change the gameplay in relatively minor ways that have significant tail-on effects over the course of the lifespan of the game itself, not of a player's run, but of the meta of the game developing almost.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see the way that FromSoft learns with each iteration, like how Dark Souls 3 is Dark Souls, but they've learned from Bloodborne, and then Sekiro is this like experiment to go, okay, what if we take the RPG elements out? And
Sekiro is sick, dude.
Sekiro is they Zeldify it almost, right? Where it's got heart containers, it's got other kinds of heart containers. Like, that's basically what it is, and it's
Oh boy.
No, he's right. Let him cook. He's right.
But with Elden Ring, it's very much like, okay, most players see magic in these previous games as something that's unapproachable, or you have to know how to build for it, or it's for your sixth New Game Plus playthrough or something like that. Whereas Elden Ring, they're just like, take it, we're gonna bake it right into the thing. We're gonna have like 30% of the collectibles that you get in this game be related to magic. So if you're not using it, you're just not using 30% of the collectibles you pick up. And it was interesting to have this conversation with you, Nicco, and then have you then come back to me a few weeks later and be like, I tried it, you were right.
Yep, that was where the fun. I found the fun. It was that.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things is like they find a way not just to mess with the players, but to like, hey, these enemies are going to body you if you don't use magic, and you could still do it if you're like the most hardcore Souls player, and if you want to, but you're not going to have as good of a time when you do. It's just interesting how they find a way to continually adjust the player experience so that future playthroughs of individual games or of the series as a whole never end up being the same for the same player twice. And speaking of that, that brings me to my first thing with Ratchet and Clank, which is something I've actually publicly suggested to Insomniac in like 2021 after Rift Apart came out. They did a form upload fill out thing, a form, I guess, in other words, where you could submit like suggestions for things for them to add to the game in post updates or anything like that. And one of the ones they did go through and do, which was that you couldn't beat the game wrench only, which is a running challenge that has been a thing in Ratchet since the first game, that you could do a wrench only challenge run. And it's gotten harder and harder as time's gone on because the games rely more on weapons. But the very first tutorial section has you shoot a gun. And for that one specific thing, you couldn't use just your wrench. And somebody noticed that on Twitter that worked at Insomniac and said, I'm going to fix that. And they just put that in, where instead of just shooting, you can also just throw the wrench. And they made the game totally wrench only. And one of the things that I've wanted to see for a long, long time, and I'm glad that they didn't actually do this right away because it led me to something else that's very important that will also come up later, was all of the games have an arena challenge where you randomly swap between all of your weapons, and they give you a set number of ammo or a set number of enemies to kill. And once you've either run out of ammo or killed that many enemies, it switches you randomly to a new gun. And never have they taken that modifier and put it across the entire game. And I think that would be an incredible challenge run to do. I think it'd be not the hardest of challenge runs, but it would make you almost in a Ratchet 1 way use your weapons in unique, novel styles to take down different enemies in ways you would never have thought to do. Fighting a big enemy with a really puny weapon is difficult, but if you have to do it and you have to kill 5 enemies to switch weapons, that kind of makes for a really cool tweak on the gameplay. And one of the things that I've noticed over time as I've played Ratchet and Clank, especially after my retrospective series where I don't play Ratchet and Clank much anymore because I've played enough of it for now, is
Burnout.
that, seriously, as time has gone on, even with like the newest games, I will play through them and still do challenge mode. And for those that don't know, challenge mode is just New Game Plus, but with some bonus New Game Plus type things, which was one of the things that Insomniac did pretty early on that a lot of studios later took under their wing. But Ratchet was one of the earlier games to do like a true New Game Plus with actual new content to it. As time's gone on, it's kind of felt like it's become obligatory. Like a lot of the challenge mode weapons level up pretty quickly, and the damage modifiers are still great, but it doesn't really feel like it's a priority, which makes sense because most players don't even finish the game with any video game, let alone with a kid's game, and then let alone going into challenge mode. So as it's become obligatory, I've played challenge mode less, and I've played the games a little bit less as a result as time has gone on. And so I feel like between that and them not really adding new things to do in challenge mode besides playing the game again with better upgraded weapons that you can buy, it would be really nice to see other modifiers like a randomized option or like a built-in wrench-only option where they don't even give you any weapons, or like a one-hit death option. These sort of challenge modifiers that you start to see in a lot of games more recently, like a Metroid Dread, for example, where they have the one-hit death mode, I believe, right? Yeah.
How would you feel about something like a boss rush type mode, where like
Yeah.
you don't heal between bosses, you literally just like
That's sort of been a thing sometimes in some of the arenas. So in earlier arenas, there would be a final boss arena where you'd go in and you'd do like 100 waves of enemies, and every 10 waves there'd be a boss. And you would have to do it all in one go. You can't heal, or if you can heal, it's like they put a couple healing items on the map for you to just pick up right then and there.
Oh, true. They could have like a zombies type mode where it's like they just keep coming.
Yeah, you could do an endless one. There was a thing in Crack in Time they almost did, which was procedurally generated arenas that didn't get very far because that game was rushed to all hell. And there's a lot of stuff that I would love to see them do in a future game to add replayability besides just having the obligatory New Game Plus that every game kind of has now, and that every game puts out as a post-launch update nowadays.
So what did they do for that New Game Plus? Because my closest experience is Insomniac's Spider-Man, and New Game Plus in that was pretty lacking.
Yeah, so that one was one that they did patch in after the fact. So Sony's been doing a thing lately where they make the Platinum Trophy relatively easy to get. You just have to experience the whole game to some degree. There's not really a super hard challenge at the end, which I think is personally kind of a good thing, because I think it encourages players to go through and finish games, because if they are semi-trophy hunters, they realize that there's a way for them to get that trophy, so they get further in the game and experience more of the game. The challenges of doing the more challenging things are in, not to use the same word again, the challenge itself. You shouldn't need a trophy as the reward, whereas I think that having trophies as the reward for just experiencing everything that these game designers are putting into a game, experiencing all the areas, all the concepts, anything like that, I think is a valuable way to maximize development time to output. With Ratchet and Clank, what they did, starting with more so the second game than the first game, because the first game's wasn't really challenge mode, but it was kind of, was that they would add purchasable, upgradable weapons. So even in Ratchet 1, there were a handful of weapons that got a gold upgrade, so you needed to find the gold bolts hidden throughout the levels, and then you would spend that plus an actual quantity of main bolt currency to buy a gold weapon. And then that gold weapon would have a bonus modifier to it, where the pistol, laser pistol, would like ricochet the shots off the wall. Or the chickens got really big when you turned enemies into chickens, and they would explode. Stuff like that. In later games, they would add a bolt multiplier, so they made it really expensive to buy the mega versions of a weapon once you maxed it out. But if you played the game without getting hit, you would have a multiplier underneath your little icon that would give you a ×2 to ×20, depending on how long and how many enemies you killed without getting hit. That would just straight up multiply the amount of money you got. And so that was the challenge, is seeing how long you could avoid taking a hit. And stuff like that was... Yeah, go ahead.
So you could call it a...
They do call it a multiplier at some point.
Multiplier?
They do call it that. But yeah, so it was really novel at the time for them to have a substantive challenge mode. But like I said, as time's gone on and they've made 4,000 of these games, it's just kind of there at a certain point. And that's a little disappointing. Just that it hasn't evolved with the times, because Ratchet's been pretty good about keeping everything mostly the same, but integrating new ideas frequently while doing that.
Valid.
Yeah. So that's the gist of it. Just more modes that you can do, more multipliers or modifiers rather, not multipliers, to the gameplay. Add Markiplier in, why not? And that was the thing that I thought to close things out. That was the thing that I thought about with the inevitable Rivet and Kit game. So there's another Ratchet and Clank from the other dimension now, and it's Rivet and Kit. And they're both pretty cool. They're both pretty rad. And at some point, they're going to do a Rivet and Kit game, which makes sense because Ratchet and Clank's story has essentially been mostly done. We'll get to that later. And I think it'd be cool to play as Rivet and Kit in a shorter game, since they're working on Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine, and probably another Ratchet and Clank game, and Spider-Man 3, and probably a multiplayer game, and all these things.
Definitely Sunset Overdrive 2, guys.
You keep telling yourself that.
I think with all of those things they're working on, a short like 5-hour Ratchet and Clank or Rivet and Kit game rather with like a procedural arena would be really, really cool. Like a way to just like keep playing around with old ideas that they didn't implement before, and then that they find a place for later, which is another thing that series has been really known for. And speaking of series that reuse a bunch of things, Trav, you had thoughts about Metroid and its use of weapons.
And that thought has kind of changed a bit after my last spiel when we talked about Prime 2, because I completely forgot. Prime 2 almost did exactly what my point was going to be, which was that I wanted to see them deviate a bit from the tools and weapons that Metroid has been using essentially since day one. Basically, every Metroid has the space jump, which I guess in the Prime games they did do it a bit differently, where it lets you double jump. Almost every game has had the screw attack, the Various suit, the powers and wave beams, the other crap
Shine
I can't
Spark.
remember. Shine
Morse
Spark.
Ball.
Yeah, I mean, as like that's been in every 2D game since.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I mean, I guess Samus Returns didn't bring it back, but
I
most
thought
of
it
them
wasn't Samus
since.
Returns.
No, they did this different thing entirely where you get to slow down time.
Okay, that's
so-
the one 2D game that I haven't finished. I got most of the way through it, but I just played Metroid 2 right before it, so I was like, I know what I'm doing
Yeah,
here.
that's
I'm
fair.
good.
Yeah,
So
and
what's a Shine Spark?
So Shine Spark is okay. So imagine you're running a marathon, right? And then in the middle of that marathon, you crouch down while you're running. Okay, you crouch, stop running, crouch. That gives you the ability to rise infinitely into space. That is the Nicco space program right there. That's a Shine Spark. Basically, you start running really fast, you crouch, and you just launch yourself straight up into the air.
It sounds
it's
like
really
a new
cool.
metal band.
Thanks for coming to the podcast, guys.
Sorry, no, that's a cool ability. That's a
no,
cool ability.
No, but it is really cool in the case of exploring, because you'll find these rooms where it's like, oh, well, there's these perfectly 2 block wide, which is exactly how wide I am, even in real life. 2 block
true.
wide spaces in the ceiling, or 2 blocks that don't quite look right. And so you think, I know what to do. I'm going to run really fast and bash my face into it. And you find a secret. And that's sort of just been in every Metroid game, except for the 3DS one, since Super Metroid.
Yeah.
And I guess I came to another roadblock with my point, which is making me realize that I guess I didn't think too hard about this. That, Samus Returns added like 4 new abilities that I guess only 2 of them were really used widely, which was the time slowdown and the press a button and see everything that's broken around you or can be broken.
No, the X-ray was in. The X-ray was.
Oh yeah,
in,
that was in Super.
that was in Super,
technically.
yeah. That was
yeah.
already a
They
thing.
just made it easier to use.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's only 4. And even
Yeah,
then, they're not all completely used. Like the rapid
over the
fire
course
and all
of
that.
20 years or 25 years, 30 years at this point, the fact that there's only like 5 or 6 new items, even
Yeah.
in the 3D games, it says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Dread had a couple new things. Like it added like a dash that felt very, I guess, Mega Man-esque at points. They have the dash. They have the cloak, which was like never used in the game, only for like
2
one
rooms.
boss and
Yeah.
doors, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was kind of disappointing. I guess what I would like to see them do is, keep the basic ideas for like, here's a suit that lets you go into hot places, because can't really do too much about that, but then just like create this whole new suite of items that act for the most part completely different, which I realize I could be just asking like, make a Metroidvania that's not Metroid.
No, I don't think that's that, because I think the thing about Metroid and the thing that has made it so magical is that there's that true feeling of solitude that the Metroid games give you, thanks to their environmental storytelling, thanks to their soundtracks, thanks to just the vibe that they give off. And I think that at a certain point, when Metroid fans have gone through all of these games, you have to question whether you really feel that sense of solitude when you know that at some point you're going to get the familiar items again and again and again and again and again. When I think that if you did something, maybe not like a whole new suite of items that replaces everything, like you said, but like maybe, like even what Dread did that was really compelling was that they gave you the items in a different order than they ever did before. Because most of the other games did it in a specific order that you knew was coming. And
I mean, like, you don't get the morph ball till like a third of the way through.
Yeah. And so stuff like that made the traversing the world much more interesting in Dread, because you didn't have the crutches that you're used to having.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really good argument to be made that if they were able to be fully creative with the production of a game, and that they, like, now that they have the stroke for it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, we know that Metroid is a successful franchise now. Prime Remastered did incredibly well. Dread did better than any other game in the series did, which, given, is not saying much because Metroid never sold that well. Yeah. But, you know, this is a post-Switch Metroid era, and everything on the Switch just does better. So I think now is the chance for you to really go wacky and experiment. And then if it doesn't work, that's okay. You can still make another Metroid, and it'll do well, especially since Prime 4 won't be out for 5 million years anyway.
Yeah. And no, I think that's actually a better way of thinking about it, because you know, they're always explaining it with these items were made by the Chozo. Every game in some capacity, every 2D game has focused on, this is the story reason for why all these planets have the same items. We're focusing on the Chozo. And then Dread, without spoiling too much, it has opened the door for moving on from the Chozo. I don't think that they totally will, but it's a possibility, and it seems likely, because it's definitely a new chapter with Samus going forward.
And I even think within a post Other M era, where they're exploring storytelling actively as like a front and center part of the game, but without, in a post Other M era, where they're doing it without talking at you. I think that there's a lot more room for them to take a different narrative direction and give you the chance to be like, oh yeah, maybe there are planets the Chozo didn't touch because there are trillions of planets. I don't know.
There are definitely more planets.
Yeah, you don't need to just use the sector of the galaxy that the Chozo hung out in and called home.
Yeah.
Speaking of trillions of planets, Brody, Borderlands has planets.
Yes, but just to finish off on what Trav was saying,
ruin my seg.
Yeah, exactly. He pointed out one of my biggest pet peeves in just about any game sequel, which is just taking away all of the powers you got from the first game. And the worst though is when they do it when they fucking tease you and they're like, here's a 30 second segment of all of the powers. Now we're gonna take them away, and you got to go get them again. I didn't play God of War 2, the original God of War 2, because they did this exact. I played it immediately after beating the first one on the remastered collection. And all the powers were taken away. And I'm like, I wanted new stuff. I wanted to have these powers and then get new ones. Why are you doing this? Infamous Second Son does a similar thing, or not Second Son, Infamous 2 does a similar thing, where they take away all of like your screen wipes.
Yeah.
But they leave all of the stuff that like makes sense to leave. Like you still have your grenade, you still have your grind ability and things like that. But I think with regards to yes.
You couldn't climb fences in Infamous 1, the game where you could climb everything. So the first thing they do in 2 is put you in front of a fence and say, hey, climb this, and then you do and you get a trophy. Probably 20% of players never got that far.
Oh, God.
My God.
But to point out two Metroidvanias that I think do this similar thing in different ways, where Guacamelee did it in a way where it was still aggravating because they literally have you face the final boss of the first game, but with your power, like Guacamelee 2 rather, with your powers, and they take them all away. And the reason is it's been so long since the first game that your protagonist got fat. and he can't do all of the moves
That's a good way of doing it.
that he used to do because he's
That's
just
good.
too old.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
that's not. It was funny enough that I was like, all right, fine, I'll let it go. But the way that I think is probably the best way that I've ever seen go about it isn't even out yet, which is Hollow Knight Silk Song, which is
Take a
this
shot.
idea.
Poor thing.
Yeah. Which, well, it's because it's how do you, because I started to think, how do you do a Metroidvania where you get to keep your powers, but get all new ones? Like, how do you get that creativity without just going so big in scope that it's just it's just an impossible task? Like, if you keep giving someone powers but don't take any away, the scope creep will just kill the game in its own way.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I guess this is for more of the comments section. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Ori 2 does that. I think Ori 2, because most of the first set of abilities that you get in the first game are movement based, I think in the second game they don't actually. They're able to enhance your arsenal of moves because they have a whole improved enemy encounter system, for lack of a better term. I think.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, in Guacamelee 2, they do it by essentially saying, "Hey, you have this new chicken form," and a lot of the new power ups are based around this chicken.
The
form.
tack method. Great.
Yeah. But the way that Silksong is doing it is just saying you're a different character. You're a different character in this universe. You don't have the same. Like you're now Hornet. You don't have the powers that the Knight had. So it's just here's an entirely new Metroidvania.
I want to be Seamus Aaron this time.
God.
So what was your second thing about Borderlands, Brody?
Yeah, well, my second thing about Borderlands, and this is an easy one, is just the tone. It's
yeah.
The thing is though, it's not like Borderlands has this reputation for its humor that I mean it definitely deserves now. Humor in quotes, definitely, but it definitely deserves that reputation for what it. When I say the humor, I mean just the style that it has, not necessarily that it is humor. But the first game, I think, struck this interesting. I wouldn't even say balance, but because it's still a very comedic game, but it's comedic in the sense that they give you this very desolate, violent world, and the comedy is basically gallows humor, and but when Borderlands wants to be sincere, that is the best the best storytelling that you get in those games, and that it can genuinely do it, and you see that all over the first game with stuff like Patricia Tanis, like when you're first meeting her and you're collecting those echo logs and finding out what happened to her and her research group and her slow descent into absolute psychosis over several weeks. It hits it's funny, kind of, but it's not really played for laughs, and it's got this genuineness to it, and that completely goes out the door in Borderlands 2. They say, okay, well, now we have Handsome Jack, and we're going to make him so annoying that you want to kill him, and everyone praises that, and I kind of get it. I kind of get what they mean, but it should start and end at Handsome Jack, because
yeah, I think I know one of the things for me that I never liked about the later Borderlands games that I thought pre-sequel did very well, actually, because that was made by 2K Australia. The Borderlands 2 and from what I played of 3 as well, used very haha, we're on the internet, LOL, we're weird humor.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I liked about pre-sequel was that from what you're saying, it almost goes back to a bit of deadpan almost, where especially in pre-sequel, more so than one probably, but they'll just throw jokes out and they won't sit on them and say, ha, don't you think that's funny? Let's say it again. They'll just throw a line out and then they'll let you live with it, and they'll move on.
I think the Australians.
Yeah. It's definitely the Australians being involved that led to that, and I'm thankful.
So I guess my question is: are you saying that they should be? So you're saying they should be less cringe with their humor, right?
Well, not even just necessarily. I think it's not even less cringe. I mean, that would be nice, but I think more so it's just that they should be more sincere, because the times that they take to be sincere are often the best. There is this moment in Borderlands 3 which stands out amongst any moment in that entire game, and it's
Is it a
Wainwright.
spoilery moment?
No, not
Okay.
particularly. It comes about halfway. It's just this rescue mission to rescue Hammerlock from like some random guy. And Wainwright, I guess his role might be. I won't say who he is, but maybe that's a bit of a spoiler. But essentially, this guy tasks you with going to find Hammerlock, and on that mission, you team up with characters from the previous games, and it's very wacky and zany, and you have to make a fucking like burger or something. I don't fucking remember. There's like sauce packets involved. It's really fucking stupid, and it's very much just in line with what you would expect. But at the end of it, you find Hammerlock, and he's in this like fucking go-go dancer ass cage, and you free him, and he thanks you genuinely for doing so, and he goes off, and that in and of itself is nice. But if you look around the room where you free him, there's this single echo log, and if you play it, you'll hear Hammerlock recording what he assumes to be his last words to his husband. And it's not played for laughs. There's no jokes. It is a genuine, like, I think I'm going to die. This might be my last words. Here is what I wish for you. Like, my husband, my one true love, all that blah blah. Like, it's incredible. It's an incredible piece of writing in what is otherwise such a game that just it's a game that is chock full of irreverence. I think is the biggest problem. It's not so much that the humor is cringe. It's that how many side missions in Borderlands end with the punchline that the quest giver dies in some horrific way? Like the entire, like it's a quest giver, it's an NPC that you don't care about, and they talk too much, and at the end you see the punchline coming a mile away. They die in an explosion, or they try to set off a rocket that goes to the moon and it fucking crashes. Like it's the same punchline every time, and it's like this need to be like, haha, we're being funny about it, we're above taking it seriously, ha. But those moments when they actually do let themselves take it seriously are the best parts of the series. I want more of that.
And a lot of that makes sense because they haven't moved past the 2009 era of their writing. And so I think the fact that it's not just the cringe, but the fact that they're so few and far between with being serious for a moment here and there, is what part of what makes it so impactful, but B, it's a symptom of the writing just having never evolved. Nicco, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just saying, so you're looking for more balance.
Yeah, I guess. Because I wouldn't say that I want Borderlands to be a serious game by any means, but Borderlands 1 had that perfect, like, I struggle to say the word balance because I don't think there was a balance so much as there was just...
je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, I guess. It's just to not take itself more seriously, but take itself more... not realistically. I'm struggling to find the word exactly because it's not serious so much as it is to just care about the world enough that you can make me as a player care when like someone dies.
Give you something to bite into, essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I don't have a seg for biting into. So Nicco, what's your second?
Yeah.
Nicco,
Well, actually,
I'm gonna bite you. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. Sorry, fellas, are we cutting this one at an hour, or are we gonna continue going through the rest of them?
We will we'll run through them quickly. I think the third set.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll give my next
Speed dating.
My next very, very cold take, which is that I really think that they should for Elden Ring this transition. This goes back to Kevin and Trav's point. Reusing content. They reuse content all the time. They've done it since Sekiro. It's just not something that I'm interested in. I could give you a financial analysis right now of why we don't need to reuse bosses in the Souls series. Especially
I'd like to see that financial assessment.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially with a game like Elden Ring, right? Because you would be decrease, like, you know, so on one hand, right, you can decrease your labor hours. You literally just don't need to put that boss or that physical area into the map at all, and that saves you on labor and time. And then So that might also help your workers not crunch, right? Because that's a huge problem right now. And the converse of that is that if you took that time and resources, right, and put them all, instead of duplicating 5 bosses, you put that all into one new boss, then that nets you, better reviews and better PR, right?
It is the highest rated game of all time.
I know, but the point stands that they don't need to reuse that content.
So, so this is weird that it's one of your cold takes. One of the things about reusing boss fights and encounters is that it gives you another fundamental mechanical lesson. So fighting those bosses is meant to be another way of teaching you how to encounter certain types of enemy or deal with certain mechanics or systems, rather than just doing it once every 12 hours and then you forget about it and then, oh god, here's a boss that I is using this thing that I haven't seen in months because I play this game for an hour every few days.
Okay, I understand what you're getting at. I think that makes more sense for the mini boss type enemies, right? That's one thing. Let me adjust this take just a little bit. I'm referring to the reuse of major bosses. Something like I don't really want to give any examples because I think that'd be.
Are you talking like the Air Tree bosses?
No, those are kind of more mini boss. I'm kind of fine with those. I'm thinking there's one very specific boss that you have to go through, and this is no spoilers, by the way. So you have to go through an entire quest line, and I mean an entire quest line, like half the game. This quest line spans half the game. And you have to go through this entire thing. You get to the end. It's really gratifying. A really, really strong, really good, impactful boss fight. Aesthetic, music, vibe, feel, fun factor. It's all there. And you get to a random cave a little bit later in the game, and that same boss is there.
It's the most egregious example. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is the most egregious example. It's one that Souls fans complain about quite a lot. And I'm not here to say that, it is what it is, right? People who didn't do that quest line then now get to face this boss here. There's benefits to it. There's two sides to this. It's not black and white. I just would prefer, personally, less repeat bosses.
It did take away where a lot of people say FromSoft, and less so now, and more so earlier. It was more about. I mean, still definitely now is more. They're less focused on providing like a direct, satisfying gameplay experience, and more focused on creating moments in your adventure that you will remember. And I think getting to that boss that you're talking about at the end of that quest line is one of the most memorable things in that game. And
Absolutely.
then finding it in that random cave, just a little bit off the beaten path.
It literally was like a wet fart. It was bad,
it just like sucked. It was like it like retroactively, like you don't want to let it, because it's like, well, I had so much fun in that quest, it was such an impactful experience, like why let this retroactively ruin that? But at the same time, undeniably it kind of does, because it just makes it less special.
Yeah, in a way I'm like, oh, like awesome, I get to fight this boss again. But in the other hand, I'm like, but it's not special anymore. Like, Radon is special,
No, they patched him, so not anymore.
Okay, well, still he's special to me. He's my baby boy. He's my good time boy.
I'll take that moment, and I'll start the rapid fires here, and then I'll end with my longer one. So I'll do our third one's rapid fire, but my second one is my rapid fire, and then we'll close off with my longer one, maybe. My next thing that I'll change for Ratchet and Clank is not change. The next thing I would like to see in the next Ratchet and Clank is that they finish the goddamn story. It's been 15 years. It's been 2007. Yeah, 2007 was when they started this storyline about how Ratchet is now the last Lombax, and it was kind of a messy storyline because there's already other Lombax that existed, and they just kind of said, yeah, don't worry about it. We already wrote the story. Junior writer, you just have to deal with this and finish the story that we blocked out for you. Too bad. And they've just been telling this Ratchet is the last Lombax, trying to find the Lombax's storyline essentially the entire time since. And given there were 5 years off after 2016's game, and there were 3 years between the 2016 game and the last mainline game before that, and the 2016 game doesn't really count because it was a movie game. But even still, they've now finally teased that they're going to go and finish the Lombax story based on some secondary lore pieces in Rift Apart. And I would just like them to do that because Clank's story has been done for years now. Ratchet's story had been done until they reopened this wound. And we've now seen that he's at the point where he wants to say that he's not looking for his Lombax family anymore. But deep down, he still kind of is. And they're kind of like, he's kind of come to terms with it. He's come to terms with the fact that he's like 35 years old at this point, and he's like been retired 5 times, and he's like, I'm just sick of this. I want to settle down and have kids with my different species wife that I don't think you can have kids with, and all this stuff. And just do it. Just tell the final Ratchet and Clank story, and if they exist after that, and there's another plot line that comes, or they're just saving the day from the hero of the game, or the villain of the game, and they're just the villain of the month type stuff. If they're doing that, cool. I don't care. Or if they end it there and they just do Rivet stuff for a while, cool. Just pull the trigger and stop and stop.
Don't make it a soap opera.
I like the idea that this then makes the first 3 games like the Quark saga.
I mean, they already were.
Yeah, but it's like with Clank's story being done and now Ratchet's one wrapping up, you got like it's just. I mean, the
Quark
idea
probably won't also be in the next game either.
Yeah,
frankly.
well, yeah, for a whole different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's not a plot thing. It's for reference. Quark's actor came down with both a bad case of COVID that back in 2020, and also has severe, I believe, Alzheimer's. I don't know if it's severe, but that's what it was described as the first time it was shared. So he's still around, thankfully, but he retired from acting because he just doesn't have the capability to do it anymore. And it's such a shame. And they did recast Quark very briefly for the 3 lines he's in Rift Apart, but I think the right way to go would be to just not have him anymore and let him retire, reference him. I don't think you need to use him anymore because he's been doing the same shtick for the last 10 years too. Trav, let's start the rapid fire round. What's the third thing you would want to see in the next Metroid game?
Well, while we're on the subject of Rapid, my leg's moving because I think the one thing that they should work on, make better movement in Metroid.
Good take.
No, I want to. So, Dread did this thing where they added dodging. Basically, I mentioned it before. It's like that dash, and you could use it with some enemies. You could dash through them, which makes it really fun. Get a quick access to shoot them in the back. That's really fun. They also expanded on the the speed booster specifically. How once you hit that super big running fast, you can go into wall jump. You can immediately slide in and out of Morph Ball, which previously you couldn't do. It would immediately break your speed. And I want to see them take that further. I mean, one simple way that they could do that, which would probably be a bad idea, but I want to see it anyway, would be the Shine Spark, as I mentioned before, Nicco, the space program, where once you launch, immediately jet at a perpendicular angle. So, like something as simple as that could add so much potential for puzzle solving, even combat. Because I want to say in like the final room of Dread, you could activate Shine Spark if you really know how to time it. There's a
puzzle in Dread that has like 4 Shine Sparks, I think, right?
Yeah.
You have to do 4 consecutive
you need to
pivots.
You need to immediately go from wall jump into Morph Ball, out of Morph Ball, back into Morph Ball, lay a bomb, and then do a Shine Spark during that time that the bomb is set, but not soon enough that you immediately crash into the thing you're about to bomb, which was really nice. I figured out that puzzle on my own time because I hate myself. Severely overthought it. but that experience of getting the hang of the movement tech is, I mean, this is a really pretentious way of putting it, but it kind of felt like how you described Breath of the Wild for a moment, where it's like capturing lightning in a bottle. I don't know if I'll have that feeling again when it comes to a 2D Metroid puzzle. And I want to see them one up that.
I will say also, ideally they do it on a console that is not Joy-Con drifted. That would be kind of nice, because if they're going to make you slam your stick 5 or 6 times, I don't know, maybe the stick should work afterwards. Brody, what was your third rapid fire Borderlands suggestion?
So my thing is just I thought, okay, what else could you improve here? And I took a look at the gameplay, and the gameplay in Borderlands has always been very much like they got it down. It's the best looter shooter on the market. If you play Destiny, fuck you. Like, it's just it's the best looter shooter. It's consistently been the best looter shooter since it's come out. How do you improve this gameplay? And the way that they've tackled that is, we add alt fires to the guns and they do new things, but I think the way that I look at it is much the same way as the mission structure. You just have to break it open, take a look at what's happening in combat in other games, where a game like Divinity Original Sin, which has a lot of elemental like mixing or like different things with different spells. So, like the most basic example is there's a barrel of water, you
rapid fire.
You spill it everywhere. Electric. It's pool electric. There's a lot of elements in Borderlands, and they're not really being utilized to their, I think, to their full ability, their full potential. They're just kind of like a rock paper scissors game with the enemy armor, and it's just, I think there's so much potential in being able to mix elements and do things like that, where you could like. I think that's where I would take the gameplay is to really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, honestly, that's another thing for Rift Apart that they sort of did, is they started having like more of the same type of gun. So there's like 3 or 4 pistols, and they each have different effects, and you get one right as you've finished maxing out the previous one. But they have ones that have like lightning, so it shocks you. They have a freeze weapon, and they didn't really use those in a way that felt like there was like a system to it. It was just that you could use them in isolation and electrocute some enemies and freeze some enemies. And because that game kind of went through some soft reboots at points in production, they didn't have many enemies to like change and like adjust how you would fight enemies. So most of them were fought the same number of ways. So same thing with that. And Ratchet and Borderlands actually have a lot of shared DNA. So that's a good one. To the point that there have been a bunch of Borderlands guns that have referenced Ratchet and Clank, actually.
Yeah.
That's sick. No, that's a really good one. I was going to say 8-player Borderlands, just to make you hate yourself more.
Oh, hell yeah.
I already maxed out at 2.
Crub Borderlands stream.
Dude, wait, 32-player Borderlands.
Just make it
we
a
all
fucking...
play 4 times.
64.
This is just a Fortnite map that everyone's trying to work together.
We're just playing MAG.
128, dude.
This is what I want to see. My new change for Borderlands 4. I want Borderlands 4 to be MAG. Thank you.
Which brings me...
actually, though.
Which brings me to my next idea, doing this episode but giving 3 things that would definitively make the game worse. First off, licensed music in Elden Ring.
Play High Hopes.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I was thinking like Nickelback, but that works.
That too. You get to the final boss, and it's just, look at this photograph.
Yeah. Just add in.
I went to Waterfalls by TLC.
Beautiful. No, that would make sense, because then you go behind the waterfall and there's nothing there, and then that starts playing.
Yeah, no, that's true.
What was your third suggestion?
So in the worst cold take probably of all time, the worst hot take probably of all time, I want them to bring back the Sekiro parry, but and by that I mean sensible parry timings. Currently in Souls games, you parry when the shield goes across your chest, and that takes too many startup frames. It's not intuitive and it's not fun. So I think bringing back the Sekiro parry where you press the button as the enemy is making contact with you, I think that makes sense, and I think it would make the game more accessible, more fun, and overall better. Kevin, what was your last one?
My last one was technically not the rapid fire one, but I didn't really have a lot to say about this one because I didn't have a lot of things that I like that I want to change about Ratchet and Clank, because I'm at the point where I put the game in And as much as you might think that I deep analyze it, I put it in, I turn my brain off, and I enjoy it. The analysis stuff comes later, and I just like being able to kill things and feel good about it. Because usually when I kill things, I feel bad afterwards. So my last suggestion for Ratchet was I would like to see them, to some extent, try revisiting the pseudo Ratchetvania level design from Ratchet 1 and a lesser extent Ratchet 2. So what those games did was mainly one. There's a whole section in the second act of the game, and it's also prevalent throughout Acts 1 and 3, where you would go to a level and you might not have all of the abilities needed to proceed through the rest of that level. So you'd get an infobot that gives you the coordinates to another planet. You go to that planet, and that gives you an item that you need. Planet C gives you an item you need on Planet A, and then once you use that item on Planet A, you can go further on another pathway to unlock the item you needed to go and finish Planet B. And it made them feel much more like a world and a planet than just a level. And one of the things that, as good as a lot of, especially Rift Apart, I love Rift Apart's level design and its world design. I think it's some of the best in the series. Especially that they made like an Alien Isolation level in that game. Which is just rad, and they just threw in like a random horror level, and it's actually really sick, and it feels good to replay, which usually the gimmick levels in Ratchet are kind of annoying when you replay them. That one feels stellar. Anyway, as good as Rift Apart was at making the 9 or so levels that game has, they are still mostly one pathway levels, or there might be two pathways, or they're big wide open areas. And while that's fine, and while that's kind of cool to see like properly done in a Ratchet game, I think it'd be cool to see something where there are multiple different pathways with multiple completely different areas, maybe some different soundtrack bits in them like the old games used to do, or like one used to do, really. And just ways to make the worlds feel a little more interconnected rather than just having, here's level 1, you did it, here's level 2, stuff like that. And that also goes into the so-called fishbowl and straw level design that the Ratchet games have, where they will take you on a pathway that loops you back to the start. And along that pathway, it's a string of like little hallways with either puzzles or platforming challenges or maybe some encounters. And those are the straws. And then they'll open you up into a big circular open area that's more of a battlefield. That is the fishbowl. And they'll take you through the straws to each fishbowl. And then at the end of that pathway in that level, it'll loop you right back to the start of where your ship is. So that way, if there's another path, you can go all the way around this way, come back, and then go and do the other one right away. It's really cool when the games do that, because it feels like there's a more tuned level design rather than just giving you a teleporter or a taxi and saying, you did it, go back to the start, kid. And a lot of why I like this stuff so much is because of the Ratchet and Clank randomizer, which is what I mentioned earlier. I'm glad that they didn't put a randomized mode in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, because if they had, I wouldn't have suggested it, and I wouldn't have found out that there is a randomizer mod for Ratchet 1 that exists. And Ratchet 1 is the only game that could really use a randomizer in a way that feels compelling because of the way that game is, and it feels like actually playing a third-person Metroid game when you're doing it with the randomizer. And I love how that game feels now that I've played with the randomizer, in that it feels fresh for the first time after 50 plus playthroughs. And I want to feel that sense of exploration again with a Ratchet game, rather than just it being a story and combat based game that is now Doom Eternal for children. I like it being that. That is just what it is in Rift Apart. I like it being that. But the thesis of this series for the entire time of its run has been a little robot and his cat buddy travel through planets finding weapons and gadgets. It is meant to be an exploration based series, and as they've told more involved stories, that's the one bit that's sort of fallen behind. Send a tweet.
It was a good tweet.
Yeah.
And I'm right there with you with regards. I mean, Ratchet 1 and 2 are my favorite of the series, precisely because I think they have a more focused balance between combat and platforming, where usually it's like one of these pathways is the combat pathway and one of these pathways is the platforming pathway. And there's a lot more, like it usually gets better when there's 3, because then one of them's like, here's puzzles or underwater, here's like the dedicated, but typically you would find a healthy balance no matter where you went, whereas now it's more like, oh, this is the platforming planet, this is the combat planet. And I think
I will say Rift Apart did a good job of not doing that.
Yes.
I think Rift Apart did a really good job of integrating all of its stuff in a way where there's always combat, but also it's fun combat for the first time in a long time. Not that they weren't fun before, but it's new. Like, they really didn't change the combat in Ratchet since Ratchet 2, and they finally said, hey, what if we give you a dash and a dodge?
I liked Ratchet PS4, but I do like that dodge idea. Yeah, I agree with that.
It's just that, like, it was a way of challenging new experienced players, where you can't just do your side flips anymore, because the enemies will actually lead their shots. And the enemies are faster than you. So your movement speed is a little slower than the enemy movement speed. So when they are chasing you and you're trying to back up and shoot them with your shotgun, they will get to you before you can blow them to bits. And that's where the dash comes in, because the dash is like literally you're phasing through dimensions so that you get away from them, and you have a bunch of iframes, and it's really forgiving, but it's a new use of a different dodge that makes you change how you play the game, which is the first time they really did that since they made the games the way they are. And I
feel like I would have almost the opposite experience with the dash, but that's because I'm experienced with Souls games. Sorry, continue. My bad.
In what regard?
Just because I feel like that's what I wanted when I played Ratchet PS4, right? Like, I was like, how am I supposed to dodge the bullets? I was like, how am I supposed to dodge the bullets and stay on target at the same time?
I think that might be an issue in your case of you were a new gamer at that point.
True, very true.
That might be that more than, like, if you played it now, it might be a little bit different. But PS4 Ratchet also had the issue of the bullets being the same color as the background a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was one of the big ones that one had.
Mm-hmm. I was definitely like overstimulated. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I definitely got the feel with Ratchet for a while, especially during the Future saga on PS3. Almost like there was like a built-in, hey, if we can tell that the player is doing like a constant movement and a fuck ton of flips, the enemies are now stormtroopers and they just won't hit you.
That was the thing that was built into the game. I think even earlier than that. Like, they always had like a background tuning system. It didn't do it in real time though. It did it based on your prior level progression. So if you struggled in the prior level, cool, they would put slightly fewer enemies and they would make them have slightly less health. But you wouldn't realize because you can't really see their health bars.
Well, that makes sense because they've been doing that since Spyro.
Yeah, since Spyro 3 was the first time they did it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a nice little background tuning system that they didn't tell you was a thing until a couple of the Ratchet designers kind of mentioned it in a Let's Play where they were talking about the behind the scenes of Ratchet 2 and 3. Then they leaked it out, and then it's even Spider-Man, I think, to this day does that.
Nicco.
The old Resident Evil 4.
I think that is where we're going to call it for this edition of the Crubcast sidecast thing. Let us know what your favorite series is and some of the things you'd like to see in a future entry down in the comments below, or let us know what you thought about some of our thoughts on these series, all 5 of them that we ended up talking about. And does anyone else have anything they want to add before we close out for the night?
I have something I'd like to get rid of, actually. I was going to say Nicco, and then he leaned forward, and I felt bad.
Okay, good, great, stellar, outstanding. As always, thank you guys for tuning into the Crubcast, or if it's your first time tuning in, make sure you subscribe. You can find us on every podcast platform. You can find us on Twitter @CrubOfficial, Twitch @Crub_official, where we stream our podcasts live at a time to be announced because we haven't actually started doing that yet, but that's okay. You'll find out soon. Stay tuned. And that's my ending.
As always, stay golden.
Yeah, as always, stay crubbin'.
Watch, I can juggle.
Fuck.